So yeah, what will happen is I'll send you two video files, one of you, one of me, and they'll both be, and
Okay.
then you can just kind of mix them together, and yeah, it'll be the nicest quality. Do you know that your mic is not good?
Not good in what way? I do know my mic is not good, but I just want to know in what
The
way.
I mean, I can hear you and all, but it sounds like there's like a lot of like room noise.
Oh,
Your
yeah.
YouTube videos sound that way too.
It's like a Yeti microphone. The problem is I travel a lot,
Mm.
so yeah, it's kind of
Oh,
seen its wear and tear.
that sounds way better already, right there, where you have
Okay,
the
yeah.
mic.
I'll just leave it here. This is how it is with making YouTube videos. I wasn't sure if I wanted it on camera, but
Now level down your mic because now it's a little hot. So if you just level down a little bit,
okay. Is this any better?
it's pretty good.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, my YouTube videos, like, I'm not a very technically adept person, but I talk about like a bunch of videos from like 2006, 2007, so I kind of think that my incompetence works for that in a certain
Yeah,
way.
it's appropriate.
Yeah. Because it's kind of weird because like I think it'd be like more jarring if like it was like super shitty irate gamer game dude quality audio and then it went to like super pristine new audio quality, but I don't know, maybe that's an excuse. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
It is
so.
an excuse, but I think
Yeah.
it's a good excuse.
All right. Well, whenever you're ready.
But yeah, thanks for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
So
no problem.
I also want to know, I know a lot of people contact you about Cinemassacre, but when's the last time someone's like, hey, can you talk about Confused Matthew?
It's been a long time. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I speak to him with like he listens to the podcast, and we like debrief on certain topics and stuff afterwards. But yeah, yeah. You know he's been out of the YouTube game for so long that I feel like it's I more know him as like a personal friend than I do as like a 2006 YouTuber, which is funny.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because Confused Matthew was someone who, in my opinion, like you could consider him to be a controversial creator, but not in the way that you would consider a controversial creator nowadays. I
Mm.
mean, nowadays it has a much darker subtext and everything when you say controversial creator. But Confused Matthew, he was like a controversial creator only within his opinions and the way he talked about movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of part of the reason I was going back to Confused Matthew, and I think there's like a good video in this because like it's kind of like a remnant of a more innocent time I feel on YouTube, and before all this stuff that's happening, whether it's you know Boogie or whatever, and all these different people, like Confused Matthew was a controversial creator when the world was a lot more innocent, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. When YouTube was a very different place. Yeah.
My first question is just generally speaking, and I know you went into this a little bit on the film or the Discount Film School podcast, but what was your first kind of interactions with Confused Matthew? How did you kind of discover him, and how did you that relationship go from being a fan of his work?
Um. So in 2006, I think March of 2006, I had a cartoon that I had made in 2003 when I was 16, right after Attack of the Clones came out, years before Revenge of the Sith came out. That was called Lord of the Rings by George Lucas. And then I made a follow up in like '08, like 5 years later, called How George Lucas Might Fuck Up Indiana Jones 4. That was so it came out before Kingdom of the Crystal Skull came out. We didn't. I don't think we even knew what the title of the movie was. But in any event, it was like a kind of a crude parody of behind the scenes of it was really based on like the Attack of the Clones DVD special features. It was something that I'd made in a video class with a friend, mocking George Lucas, which of course is like really out of fashion now because it all seems so quaint in retrospect. But it was the idea was like Lord of the Rings was coming around the same time, and by comparison, it felt like it had so much more vision than the prequels, and it had so much more like visual dynamics and heart and all these things. And so, the joke was, how would Lord of the Rings come out if George Lucas made it? Because he would make it under the kinds of conditions that he made the prequels under. which would later, many years later, be far better articulated by Red Letter Media than anybody else with the Plinkett reviews. But I don't know how or why. Oh, right. Okay, yes. Confused Matthew DM'd me on YouTube. Yes, there was. You could DM people on YouTube back then. You had a.
Yeah, I
It was
remember.
before YouTube went through like 5 to 10 different iterations of how it wanted to manage accounts. Now you just have a Google account, and that's where your Gmail is, and that's where your whatever. But they were experimenting with all these like third-party Google apps. There was this thing called like Google Google Wave, where it was like a chat platform. And anyway, so they were
Oh
like,
yeah.
you're gonna have like a Google One account, and then you're gonna have. There was a time, this was around the time where you only had a YouTube account, so your YouTube account was total. In fact, I don't know what year. It must have been '07. I don't know what year Google bought YouTube, but prior to that, of course, you just had your own YouTube account, so you could message people. Is the point? And yeah, I think this had to have been '08, 2 years after Lord of the Rings by George Lucas came out. Confused Matthew left a comment on it that said, I think on the Indiana Jones one, that said like, "You done Confused Matthew proud, boy." I think that's what the comment said. And so I was like, who the hell is Confused Matthew, and why do I care if he's happy? And so I clicked his channel. And another major distinction about YouTube at that time was you could only upload videos in 10-minute increments. It was their way of trying to prevent you from uploading full movies. They didn't have nearly the detection system they have now for copyright, so they would just kind of limit you. So it's like and what I saw was I don't know, I think a 3-part review of the Phantom Menace that was in depth. So it was like 30 minutes. And I know that sounds so commonplace now that somebody would do a half hour on one movie. They would do like a half hour, like clip farmed, in-depth narrative, highly editorialized review. But back then, like 30 minutes on YouTube just talking about one movie, it was like unusual. And then I find out that he's done Attack of the Clones and he's done Revenge of the Sith as well. And I was like, it blew my mind that on YouTube you could watch essentially a 90-minute movie that was a review of these other movies. And of course, this was post AVGN and Channel Awesome and stuff, but it was novel. A feature length review of a movie, right? Like James Rolfe had never released a feature length review of a movie before. And yeah, Confused Matthew has this really unique voice, both like, his actual voice is kind of entertaining, but also his level of frustration. He seems very put off by the movie, but he also seems sort of distant from it. Like he can like half remember it. Again, this all felt novel back in 2008.
Also, the Jedi are part of the Republic. So again, if the answer to my first two questions is yes, then the Republic has sent the Republic to negotiate with the Republic about lifting trade sanctions on the Republic. This is the equivalent of a guy standing alone in a room and saying, "Shut up. No, you shut up. You shut up. You shut up."
So I watched it beginning to end, and I think my friend Keith and I sent it to him, and he was like, "I love this Confused Matthew guy." And then I took it upon myself to DM him and say, like, I just want you to know those were great. And he was like, "Oh my God, my brother and I love your cartoon. Like we've watched your cartoon a million times. We quote it all the time. We're always talking about your cartoon." And then so now we knew each other somewhat. And then I started following his channel, and he did actually what the Channel Awesome method was, which he would post a trailer for his new review, whether it was Minority Report or Lion King or, all the greats. And he would link you to a blip.tv video. Blip.tv was like a YouTube competitor that was pretty safe from copyright detection and did pretty reasonable payouts for commercials and ads and that sort. It is really before YouTube had it figured out. I would say that YouTube started to figure it out sometime around like 2010, 2011. That's when they started to form into the YouTube that you kind of know today. But before that, it was really just like a video upload site, and that was kind of the end of it. They didn't have I don't think they even had a partnership program at that time. So everybody was going over to Blip. And I think in that interview, Confused Matthew said that he was able to pull in like $500 a month, like reviewing movies, which was I think at the time he was working at a pizza place, so an extra $500 to rant about movies. And yeah, and then it became obvious that his shtick, his brand, his point of view, the reason to watch him is because he has what the kids would now call L takes. he has, he he'll tell you why the Lion King is bad because Simba is actually an immoral character, and here's all the reasons why.
Simba, our supposed hero and protagonist, is an asshole. I mean, he doesn't listen to anyone, he's not very nice, he treats everyone around him like shit, and he only cares about himself. When I'm king, I'm gonna do everything my way. This place is gonna be dedicated to loving me and doing what I want to do. And if you don't like it, then you're fired, you dickface.
And what was compelling about it was, instead of giving the movie the benefit of the doubt or leaning into it or trying to read between the lines or letting the music or letting the performances manipulate you, he was kind of only analyzing the writing. So he would say like I'm just going to purely what you tell me about this character is what I'm going to believe, and then I'm going to form an opinion about that. Yep. I think that's what he was most adept at. And whether or not I agreed video to video or if I thought he was being ungenerous or whatever, didn't really matter. It was the perspective was really funny and fresh and different. And then, he's, I think Minority Report was his least favorite movie. At some point, he eventually was like, hey, if you give me $20, I'll review any movie you want. He did that for a little while. And my wife was like, I want him to do Pumping Iron. So we have it somewhere. I think I saved it on a hard drive. It's Confused Matthew's review.
It's still up on Confused Matthew Archives on YouTube.
It's still up there?
Yeah, and so is, I believe you requested Lady in the Water yourself?
Yeah, I requested Lady in the Water.
And that's up there, too.
I'd just seen it around that time, and I thought that would be perfect for him. This was before M. Night Shyamalan was definitely a bad filmmaker. Yeah, and at some point he pulled out. He was no longer interested. He had said his piece. I think I remember he did 2001: A Space Odyssey, and he got more pushback from that than normal. It was less fun to get the pushback on that one. He dabbled in some Twitch streaming a couple of years ago, after Endgame came out. I remember he did a little, he would discuss a Marvel movie here or there. But since then we've just kept in contact in our personal lives. He still we've had long discussions about Batman v Superman and you name the Zack Snyder's Justice League, and so I get a personal Confused Matthew take. I get my very own videos in essence. That's the story of us. Oh, there was another. He saw my feature films too. I'm a filmmaker and I made a number of feature films, and I made this one called Abo the Hugh Monkey. It was about a half man, half ape, and it's a pretty high concept movie. And I was always really flattered that Confused Matthew really liked that movie. So much so I was like, damn, it was a missed opportunity. I should have used my $20 instead of Pumping Iron or Lady in the Water. I should have had him review my own movie because that would have been kind of nice. And yeah, I got to know his brother as well. Super sweet guy. So that's, and I think what's one of the most compelling things about Confused Matthew is just this notion that somebody would have come on the internet, said their piece, and left. It's great. You don't really even as a YouTube creator myself, the days that I'm when am I ever going to wind down? Am I ever going to stop? Am I going to be 50 doing this? The only way I can see myself stopping is by gradually stopping, making fewer and fewer and fewer until there's none. But that's not what he did. He just went bye-bye. And I'll add one other thing to that. Something he told me once where I was like, you got to be fucking kidding me. Is a lot of those reviews, unless I'm mistaken, and there's a Confused Matthew archive that has them all, but a lot of those reviews are gone and gone forever. He did not store them on a personal hard drive. He uploaded them to blip.tv, and then when that went away, that was it. He did one that was about the Clone Wars movie, and he mentions me in the video, and I think I pulled that down. I think I have that because he mentioned me. I wanted to put it on my website, but. Yeah, but I couldn't believe he didn't store his own copies.
Humorously enough, there was actually a more engaging Christopher Lee voice done in the YouTube exclusive parody, The Lord of the Rings by George Lucas. And Frankie, if you're listening to this, I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, there's a channel called Confused Matthew Archive that has a lot of them from the Blip days, which he did not upload, and he disowned, I think, personally, a lot of those.
Disowned?
Yeah, because he said he wasn't happy with a lot of the stuff he did in the blip days because he felt, I
Yeah.
guess from what he said, he was going through some personal issues, and the character itself became a lot more angrier and vitriolic, and
Yeah.
like kind of personally attacking. I mean, I don't know if you want to go to attacking, but maybe insulting like filmmakers and even audiences or critics that like those movies. So, did you kind of notice that? Because you, how new was the Star Wars reviews when you saw them? You said that was in 2008, so that was kind of like in the era that he was still proud of his work in
Yeah.
retrospect. So, did you kind of notice that transition in this character?
Yeah. Well, the way I remember thinking of it as he became more elevated, I didn't know that it was due to personal stuff until he mentioned it. But I thought it was more like the less insight and commentary he had about a movie, the more the character piece of it had to make up for the lack of insight about the movie. It's like not so dissimilar. Not to bring it back to James Rolfe, but once you've reviewed all of your childhood NES games, and now you're just kind of like digging for like what else can I say, because YouTube
Yeah.
demands constant content. Yeah, that kind of you end up having to make up for it by yelling more or something. You don't have anything to say about it.
Yeah, it's actually kind of funny because I used to regret not getting into making YouTube videos earlier because I started like my current path when I was like 27, but I was like, actually, that just gives me more time to like have things that I've sit on and like considered, and like I don't feel like I'm grasping at straws yet. So
Yeah,
maybe it was a good thing.
yeah. It's I think it's one of the most challenging things about being a creator generally. I'm old enough to um I've never really like I make a lot of YouTube content, but I never have quite felt like a YouTuber because I predate YouTube. So like it was more like I was taking the filmmaking thing to YouTube, or I was making the videography to YouTube. But even then, even like, hey, what am I going to make for a feature? What am I going to make for a short film? You're kind of always like searching for something to say, which is backwards. It's more like you're supposed to be inspired to say something, but sometimes just to feed the machine. You're trying to come up with stuff, and that's why it's really important that artists continue to grow as people, like as in their
Yeah,
personal lives. Otherwise, yeah,
absolutely.
you will just say the same stuff over and over again.
This is kind of a side tangent, but I actually watched Having Fun up there last week. It was really good. I was the person
Oh,
who
right
bought
on.
it. I don't
You
know, the
bought the
digital
digital
copy.
copy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's great.
So
Thank you. I
yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah, no problem. Are you working on any other features? I think that was your last one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I haven't done well. I did a feature length documentary called "Till Death Do Us Part" that was about how expensive weddings are. But other than that, we've been focused on Box Mac, What's in John's Cart, obviously this podcast that we do all the time. I've uploaded something like 1,500 videos in the past 9 years. So it's been, and they're all pretty edited. So I've just
Yeah.
been focused on that because I have a child now and a family and a day job, like I said. And so um, the creative stuff is still really hard work, but at least when you do it in kind of an episodic video to video way, you're able to make a lot of progress without like a feature. You kind of have to stop the whole world, stop your whole
Yeah.
life for like 2 years and make one. And then like the value prop is hard because where are you going to screen it in 2024? A film festival? Like maybe, but but normally like film festivals are mission driven, and so they're looking for a specific type of movie. You can't just make a good movie or one that you think is good and try to get in. And then even if you do get in, like the audience might not show up physically. Like theatrical movies are kind of on their way out. At least at the moment, they're suffering. So there's not really a lot of incentive to make a feature film, but I will do it again someday, just because I enjoy doing it, and it might. And I've grown a lot since 2013 when I made Having Fun Up There, so I intend to do it again someday. I was toying with this idea of doing something about speed running as kind of as symbolism for human achievement. Like the competition with oneself, and I probably won't do that, but there's some other ideas along those lines that I keep having bursts of inspiration for. So I think maybe as my daughter gets a little older, because she also wants to be in one of these movies, and that's probably the number one reason I would do it is just to indulge her.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, I guess on that note, I went to film school for screenwriting and stuff like that. I consider myself to be more
Oh,
of a
cool.
writer than a YouTuber too. hence my technical inabilities. But yeah. So with Confused Matthew, he was really considered like a screenplay analysis, or at least that's what he later kind of considered himself to be more be. And I
Yeah.
think that's more of an apt description of him than a movie reviewer. So I guess like I don't know. Do you kind of agree with the general principle he had on movies, where it's like it's only as good as the screenplay, even if you just maybe disagreed on how it was being played out? But like, I guess how integral, I guess, is a screenplay to anything that you make?
Yeah. That's a good way to ask it. Have you ever seen the YouTuber David Stewart?
I don't think
Have you
so.
heard of
No.
him? He's like a novelist, academic guy. He has little musings that I find really intelligent and insightful. And he recently did a video called, it was something like, "Why is Hollywood screenwriting so bad?" And his answer was like, it was kind of twofold, one being the inverse of the other, which was a good screenplay is not integral to a movie being a hit, and not all movies that have great screenplays are. It's not common that movies with great screenplays are necessarily hits.
Yeah.
So the screenplay is not the foundation of a movie as it relates to its popularity or to its earning potential. As for like the art itself, I think probably you could think of good examples of you could probably think of a good example of a movie where some fundamental thing was missing and the movie still was okay because it made up for it in all other areas. So like you could imagine, and actually I think that's true of everything except for performances. I think the fundamental building block of a movie is performances. I just recently did a video reviewing the finale of The Acolyte, which I think was morally confused and had all kinds of problems. And I was talking about the dialogue, and what I cut out the pregnant pauses, the gaps, the breaths between lines. So it's, in effect, it removed the performances because performances are all in timing. And it really revealed how stiff and kind of bizarre and almost like senseless the dialogue was. There was a Project Greenlight. Do you remember that show, Project Greenlight, years ago?
I haven't seen it, but I remember it.
Yeah, it was like
Out.
Ben Affleck and Matt Damon via Miramax would fund somebody to make their movie. You know, it was a screenplay contest, and then you got to make your movie. And they were the first year, whoever won with their screenplay got to they got to produce and direct their screenplay. So you got to direct the very movie that you wrote. The second season, they were like, that was a bad idea. We should probably have like a director winner, and we should have a writer winner. So they had a contest for best writer, and then that was going to be the screenplay, and then a contest for best director. And one of the ways that they evaluated directing was they handed the directors like a nonsense script where the dialogue was, you know, almost AI generated, but by like a nonsense AI, where one line didn't relate to the next. And then they all interpreted that dialogue, you know, visually. And some of them made comedies, and some of them made horror movies, and some of them made romances and tragedies. And it's fascinating to see because, yeah, like purely through visual storytelling, through performances, through mood and tone and music, you can tell almost any story.
Listen.
And yeah, so I don't want to shrug off screenwriting. When I evaluate screenwriting, I kind of think of it in three different buckets. Like one being the story, like what's this about philosophically. One is of course the plot, like does it, you know, is it well structured? And I think structure is one of the more important things about like because if your audience is not jiving with the rhythm and pacing of the thing, they're gonna bow out. And then the third would be dialogue, like, you know, how are these characters expressing themselves? How are we telling the story through the characters? Normally, there's very few examples, I think, where there's a great movie and you weren't telling the story through the characters.
Yeah,
that's my
I would
answer.
agree with that too. Yeah, that's a really good answer. And and I do agree. Like there are certain cases where, you know, movies can totally, like a movie like one of the worst movies I've ever seen is like Gus Van Sant's remake of Psycho, and there's nothing wrong with that screenplay because it's just the screenplay from the original movie, but it's the way that like it's all performed and presented and everything.
Yeah,
So
it's totally different
yeah, it's
movie.
very
Yeah.
yeah, it's very possible. But yeah, with Confused Matthew, I actually remember you saying um in that film in that podcast you did with him that he was you said that you thought he would make like a good filmmaker or a good like screenplay person, and I just kind of want to know why do you think that, and what what sort of idiosyncrasies do you see in people that kind of give you that impression, generally speaking?
Well, I think that what makes a good leader, so forget the arts even, or include the arts, but take any venture, anything worth getting up and doing. What makes a good leader is somebody who has vision. And
Yeah.
in order to have vision, you have to have like an opinion, and you have to be discerning, and you have to feel strongly about what's right and what's wrong, what you're not going to do, what you are going to do, what you're going to say yes to, what you're going to say no to. Like, that's the driver of the car. And
That's it.
when he evaluates a screenplay, he's very good at not allowing himself to be manipulated by what the filmmaker wants you to feel and think. He's just taking the raw, information that he's receiving, and he synthesizes that and then decides whether or not you met your own standard. So I think that could translate really nicely into executing his own vision. It doesn't necessarily follow that he would have his own creative vision for something, but he has at least those building blocks. I haven't listened to that interview since we did it, so that was like 11 years ago. So I don't remember what I said, but I'm sure it was all very insightful and intelligent.
Very much so.
Must have been. I was 25 or something.
Yeah. I guess it's the reason that I'm here talking to you right now.
Yeah,
So.
nice.
But like, kind of on that note, so from what I remember from watching Confused Matthew, I think he only really collaborated with two other people in the YouTube reviewing sphere, one being you, the other being SF Debris. So,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so like what were kind of so I guess he wasn't the type of person to really involve himself with the community that much, so but you said he DM'd you initially, so
No, I messed that
I
up.
was just-
I
Oh,
think
okay.
I remember now. He commented on the Indiana Jones video,
Oh,
which
okay.
inspired me to look at his channel,
Fine.
and then I DM'd him, and he said, "Oh my God, I'm a fan too." That's how it happened.
Oh, okay. Yeah, cool. So
So we flirted.
oh, okay. All right. So from that foreplay, how did it kind of elevate into where you ended up? I guess being more of like, I don't know how personal of friends you were at the time. It sounds like you're very personal friends with him now,
Right.
compared to the original. But like, yeah, the progression of that, like, did he ever tell you that his name was Daniel Warren before he like released it publicly, for example? Or was like there any like behind the scenes stuff that he got into that he didn't really release publicly? And I'm not trying to like dox him or anything or like give out any personal information, but just out of the stuff that he's publicly talked about now.
Yeah, so much so I actually didn't know that he was public about that. I remember he did like a face reveal on one video, but I didn't know or didn't remember that he actually did give away his name. So much so I felt protective of like, oh, I shouldn't at any point say I'll just call him Confused Matthew, because he definitely does seem to want to live a private life right now. But I think in our DM conversations, which again, like those DMs, they were kind of more like Reddit messages is how it worked on YouTube at the time, where it was kind of more like an email platform. You weren't like going back and forth rapidly. So we would kind of like email for a while with each other. Actually, I think we did literally email for a while. And then at some point early on, he was like, "Hey, by the way, my name is," and he sent me a Facebook friend request, and I think we've been pretty much in contact on Facebook since then.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and it sounds like you still kind of get exclusive Confused Matthew content just from talking to him that nobody else has seen. And
he'll kind of out of nowhere he'll DM me like a big like novella about his thoughts on some topic, but or he'll hear me weigh in on James Rolfe or whatever, and he's like, "Oh my God, I haven't watched AVGN in 10 years. I can't believe all of this has happened. Thank you for bringing this to light," or whatever. But Yeah, and we debate too. You know, we find ourselves debating sometimes. But yeah, I always appreciate his insights. I'll say this, he's been nothing but kind to me. He's always been so supportive of all my projects. His brother too, actually. His brother was, I made this movie called Sexually Frank, and he was really, he really thought the movie was great. And, those guys have just always had my back, and they got right back to me, a million years ago, and they've stayed in contact with me. And, yeah, they're some of my favorite, friends that I've met from YouTube, frankly. They're great guys.
Sweet. Yeah. And that's another kind of reason I wanted to go into the Confused Matthew video, or like, because he was someone who you could kind of consider to be like in the angry reviewer scene back then. Yeah. That was like dominated by James and Doug Walker, obviously, but also had like all these other people. And what I've kind of find to be intriguing, and one of the reasons I go into it, and I can't speak for you, but maybe this is part of it too, but it always seems like there's a very big, but it's different with every person, but there's always like a little bit of the real person in a character, and then there's also like an exaggeration. So for like James, or even like Irate Gamer, it's very night and day the way that they actually present themselves. But with people like Linkara or Mike Matei or Game Dude, it's like not so night and day. So it's kind of the whole thing with Confused Matthew is that he always, even though he kind of came off with the angry reviewer persona, he always seemed to me like a pretty nice guy whenever he was like doing Q&As or like doing the streams later on and stuff like that.
Yeah, he definitely is.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, were you kind of, I don't know if you were like surprised, or could you tell like going into that like, oh, this is not like a bitter, angry person in actuality, it's just someone expressing themselves that way?
Yeah, I guess I had pause at first where I was like, he did express so much like frustration over the prequels that I didn't know if he was going to, I didn't know what side of his face he was going to show to me. But he was just really gracious, and yeah, and then it became obvious like that this is a character and he's having fun, and which was not unusual for the time. But you make a good point that there are definitely what you see is what you get type creators. It could be, maybe not in all cases, but in at least some notable cases, that people who are they are private citizens, they just kind of do YouTube extracurricularly. That those people might be a little bit more like their YouTube life is kind of segmented from their personal life more in those cases. Mm-hmm. Whereas like if you're Linkara or you're Mike Matei or whatever, and like YouTube is kind of your life, then there's maybe less separation between the guy on and off camera.
Yeah,
there's maybe something to that, because it really, like, he was a pizza delivery guy or something like that. Or he was making pizzas or something, and he would upload these funny reviews at nighttime. So. I don't know that there was much of like an ego at the time to have over the whole thing.
Yeah, well, it seems like whenever he talks about it, he seems really humble about it. And I mean, like, he seems thankful for like the fact that people watched and everything. But like, I remember him saying like a lot of people thought that he was doing it for attention, to like, because he had these contentious opinions. He's like, he thought he was like trying to rile people up, and that just, I never came across that way to me. Like that he was like, oh, this person's just malicious and he's trying to piss people off because he didn't like The Lion King or whatever. But
yeah, so much so I think he kind of was upset when he heard that people took the wrong impression away from him, and that was I think that's part of what contributed to his decision to leave. It's just funny to think that like now, stating some contrarian opinion about a beloved movie is like a business model. Like people do that all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of funny because, like, I know that yourmoviesucks.org was inspired by Confused Matthew because he was so pissed off at the Lion King review when he saw it that it actually inspired him to make a YouTube channel of his own.
That's wild.
So, yeah, exactly. And now he's like one of the biggest movie reviewers out there, and it started with spite for Confused Matthew's Lion King review.
That's really funny.
That's just, it's really
way to go, Daniel. Look what you've caused.
Yeah, so I guess when you were talking to him and he was talking about that transition that was going on in his personal life, did he change in demeanor, I guess, like in emails or anything? Because I believe the podcast you did with him, I remember you said it was like after the producers of the review or the producer's review he did, and that was like one of his later uh videos that he did before he like stopped. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, did you ever, was it pretty much the same when you were talking to him, from how he began to like even nowadays, as opposed to how the character developed?
No, I think the guy that I spoke to privately has been the guy that I've continued to speak to privately. I don't think there's
Yeah.
been any character development whatsoever in his life. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I've he's been just like a consistently gracious, nice guy.
Yeah.
Even when we debate, he's pretty like pretty effusive. Like when he can tell that I'm getting worked up, he's like, "All right, well, whatever." Let it go.
Yeah. What do you guys debate about? Is it just like, I don't know, Star Wars opinions or something? Or is it?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, some of the trends in these movies, whether he sees them or not sees them, if I see them and don't see them, that kind of thing.
Okay,
There's
cool.
a lot of stuff we talk about on Red Cow Arcade.
I was gonna go a little bit more into like the contentious stuff, just in terms of like you've kind of received criticism yourself in terms of like the James Rolfe stuff. So I mean,
Yeah.
were you ever like before, with Confused Matthew, when you were watching him, he was kind of like someone who also got the brunt of the um, anger from people back then. So I don't know. Has there been any discussions on like how to handle how you both kind of individually approach those type of things?
No, I don't think we ever talked about that. I think at this point I probably have faced more of it than he ever did back then because it's just higher volume, you know.
Yeah.
I think probably if anything we would have talked at the time about the extent to which people defended the prequels because we got a lot of that at the time too. There were
Yeah.
I remember we were always shocked by how many people would defend the prequels. Now it makes sense actually, but
Yeah. I was gonna
different
say. I
time.
mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot more prequel love going around, and I mean, I don't really care for much Star Wars outside of the original trilogy, so I stay out of that stuff.
Yeah,
But
that's the new cool thing to say.
see, I'm not trying to be cool at all.
I never
I don't
liked it
consider
anyway.
myself cool. Yeah.
I don't even know
I
what
did.
Star Wars is.
Yeah. What the hell is a lightsaber? Um,
Anybody who likes a lightsaber is dumb.
yeah, it's just a colorful sword. What am I? I was gonna make a gay joke, but I think I'll stay away from that.
We best-
Um, Confused Matthew said that he's done producing content, and I don't know if Stand and Stan is like done, or Gabe is done, but like, would you ever have any of them on the podcast if they
Oh, yeah.
wanted to?
Yeah,
Because
Yeah, I would have Confused Matthew on in a heartbeat for sure. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
because
if especially if they're like a movie like Deadpool and Wolverine it'd be really fun to have him on there because that's a great example of a movie that it has a lot going for it and I could defend it in many different dimensions, but as a screenplay it's not very strong and I think he would probably object to a whole, but he always surprises me. Sometimes that was one that we did debate a little bit. Was he didn't like Guardians of the Galaxy 1, but he loved Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I also happen to love Guardians of the Galaxy 2, so we overlap there. But the idea that you just straight up wouldn't like Guardians 1 like just makes no sense to me at all.
Guardians of the Galaxy is one gigantic 2-hour exposition dump. Nearly the entire movie does nothing but explain and set up the plot, and the precious few moments dedicated to its characters also merely explains either their backstories or what they're going to do in the plot. The movie is just dead, and considering what the ads made it look like, I am truly surprised and truly disappointed this time.
So yeah, but I would love to disagree with him, and yeah, I totally would have him on if he would ever do it. I bet he would do it. I bet we could make him do it.
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people would be very interested, from your audience, just because you do, even though it's not James Rolfe related,
It's YouTube, yeah.
it's very much like within the old angry reviewer scene, and it's someone you
Yeah.
kind of knew. And actually I do. I guess if you have time for like one more question, I mean, like there was a review of Confused Matthews that I was watching the other day, and it actually kind of made me laugh because it was his review of the Angry Video Game Nerd movie. And in that review, I mean, he gives it a negative review, but he's so apprehensive, like he's really walking on eggshells, and he's just like, oh, I mean, I don't want to ruffle any feathers here. James is I don't like speaking negatively.
I'm sorry that I didn't like your movie, but honestly, this isn't even about me. It's about the film you wanted to make and that clearly the fans were happy to see. My own thoughts and feelings are but a tiny drop in the much larger bucket of your film's success. My advice is pay it no mind and just focus on the positives. You worked hard on this, and you deserve it.
But it's very funny to me in retrospect that the YouTuber would feel any sort of apprehension like talking bad about the Angry Video Game Nerd movie.
Charming.
So yeah, it's really like actually kind of cute whenever I watch that video. It's like, oh,
that's nice. I remember when Doug Walker did the Angry Video Game Nerd movie, and he really the only criticisms were kind of in character, so it didn't come off offensively. But there's a movie that certainly didn't age very well. I don't know. Infamously, I don't know how many people know about it, but I re-edited the AVGN movie. I cut out 50 minutes of it, and I focused the story, and I got rid of things that made no sense. And I plan eventually. It would have been good to do it this year. This is the 10th anniversary, but I'm gonna do it eventually. I'm gonna do like kind of a breakdown of what I re-edited and why I re-edited it to what I did. That'll be kind of a fun video someday.
Nice. I would totally love to see that. I mean, I don't know how many. I don't even know. I didn't even think there was like 70 minutes of salvageable stuff in that. But if you believe there is, I mean, that's cool.
Well, let's not get crazy. But I'm not sure that I made a good movie out of it. But I definitely, I cleared a little bit of a path. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Like, remember the whole thing with the GameStop that he works at and all that? Like, none of that's consequential to the movie itself. And it just detracts because it's unfunny, it's long. It repeats information because we already got the whole ET thing elsewhere. They have 2 car rides, one on the way to work and one on the way out of work, where they state the same information about the landfill. There's all this, and I tried to preserve some of like the flavor. Like there's the zombie dream he has, which like is also not consequential to the plot. Like most things are not consequential to the actual plot, but I try to keep in anything that like would preserve his vision and get rid of everything else that just honestly should have been edited out of a early draft of the script. It's the kind of thing you'd hand to somebody that would read it and go, yeah, why do we need all the GameStop stuff? It really slows that, especially. That's like it's something like 15 minutes of early on in the movie that just stops the plot from being able to proceed. And it confuses the audience as to who the hell the nerd even is, because there's kind of like an in-world confusion about like, is he a celebrity? Is he a guy with a day job?
I still don't understand what they were going for with that regard.
So but as it so happens, cutting out a lot of that stuff actually does help clarify things a little bit if you just cut.
Okay.
Editing is a really important skill.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's something that well, I mean, again, if I start talking about the Cinemasker stuff, I mean, you'll never get to the other podcasts. So, I mean, yeah.
And this other guy wants to talk to me about VHS on his podcast.
Nice. Yeah. Do you collect any VHS? Because I know you have a lot of like retro stuff at your place. So.
Yeah, I did a video recently where I showed off some of this. I've started to collect, and it's we're going to be producing a Box Mac VHS Best of and Halloween.
I heard
it's
about
like a
that.
boutique thing. That's going to be fun. So yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Let me know if let me know how the progress goes. I'd like to see how it all turns out.
Thanks, I appreciate that, man. And
all right, man.
Yeah, I'll definitely.
Thank you so much. Thanks for thinking of me.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, yeah, I'll send this over to you either tomorrow morning or tonight. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate it. So.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Peace out.